Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I last posted a video. I've decided to completely forego the weekly reading vlog as I haven't been reading that much. Like, there's no point to the reading vlogs if I'm not reading much in a week. So yeah, so today I'm bringing you guys the top books of 2019. Without further ado, let's get started. Now, when I first started writing my list, I actually had 19 books, but then I, rechecked and see if I definitely had like 19 top books or 19 favorite books, or I can lessen it or add a little bit more, and I came up to 20 books. So, oh well, the books are not in any particular order. I actually started to list this according to when I read them, and then just went from there. So, okay, so the first book for this list is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is the first time I read this book this year. Well, this is the first time ever that I've read this book, and this is a classic. Everybody knows this book. Everybody knows what this is about, pretty much. And obviously, throughout the years, I've heard about this book, and I've been wanting to read this. At the same time, I was afraid because I've tried reading classics before, and they don't really the writing style is very different, and it's something that I need to get used to. And sometimes, some classics are dragged on. Like, they don't need to be that long. They don't need all these really confusing words, confusing scenes that are not essential to the story. And I know back then, when you're writing a book, the longer it is, the better. They want you to write really long books. That's why a lot of classic books have long drawn out plots and a lot of segues and a lot of scenes that are not really necessary. It's just there to add to the add to the length of the actual story. So I was afraid I was gonna do that with this one, and so I was pleasantly surprised when I started reading this book and was really enjoying it. I loved the witticism of Jane Austen's writing, because this is set in the 1900s, and so women, especially before, we have a lot of restrictions and a lot of things that are expected from us. I mean, even now we can still observe those things, but especially with stories set in before, especially in terms of marrying and finding a husband, it's very important. It's like the number one thing, or the only thing that girls should be worrying about. It's just sometimes when I read books set during those times and with the main plot as a romance, it doesn't sit well with me, especially with all the crap that girls have to go through and have to put up with, and the things that people say about girls and women and what they should and shouldn't do and stuff. It gets really frustrating with me. I mean, I understand it has happened before, and it's still happening sometimes until now, but reading about it can get really, really frustrating. But I liked how, even though this is set during those times and written during those times, it still felt very modern in terms of the focus of the story is the relationship between these two characters. And I love how the guy, Darcy, is not really forcing any of the female characters that he gets entangled with to act a certain way, or to say certain things, or be a certain way. He's just he does his own thing. He expects them to do their own thing. There's no oh, guys act like those before. It's accepted. That's the way guys are supposed to be, or that's the way girls are supposed to be. Girls are like that. Definitely, I have some qualms about some characters and some situations, and how some situations went about and how people reacted to it. But overall, it was such a fun reading, and I really enjoyed it. I loved it. So it was actually one of my reading goals this year to read 2 classic books at least, and this is one of them. Well, the only one, I think. I didn't really meet that goal, but I will get into that on my reading goals wrap-up, or reading year wrap-up. Anyway, that is it for Pride and Prejudice. I feel like I talked about that a little too much. Anyway, moving on. Alright, so the next book in this list is Circe by Madeline Miller. This has been going around booktube the previous year, so 2018 when it was released. I think that's what I remember. So this is a retelling of Circe's story, one of the Greek goddesses, and this is told by Madeline Miller. And again, this was very much hyped up. A lot of people love this book. A lot of people love her writing, and I've always been someone who loves Greek stories and Greek retellings. Like when the Percy Jackson series came out and like it became really big, I was like so happy about it because I love Greek mythology retellings, and just Greek mythology in general. So I was definitely interested in reading this book, and I loved it a lot. It definitely gave humanist and character to Circe, because a lot of Greek gods and goddesses, they're expected to be arrogant and unempathic and just selfish because they're gods. They don't really care about what happens to humans. They have these they can't really directly affect a human's lives, but they still can, and they have had, like, you know, throughout Greek mythology, they have had hands in the tragedy in human lives, and they can get very callous because they are gods. So here in the story, we definitely see Circe when she was born and how she lived her life as a god and goddess, and how she has observed, you know, humans, and how she's learned from them, and how she, you know, keeps humanity within her from all these experiences she has. And it's such a beautiful story because, again, it's a retelling of Circe's story, and Circe is not a very popular Greek god or goddess, you know, unlike Zeus and Aphrodite, Athena, Poseidon, Hera. They're just not very, she's not one of the more popular gods and goddesses, or gods or goddesses. So it's very interesting to learn more of her story, and also to get like a reinterpretation of her story and what could have happened or what could be behind. It's like kind of like historical fiction where you're reading someone's story, but there are a lot of details that could have been left out, that could have explained, you know, certain actions and certain events, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, Circe by Madeline Miller. I also read her other book the year before Circe came out. It was about Achilles, is it? I forgot already what it was. No, Perseus, I think. Anyway, I really enjoyed that story too, but I think that was YA, and Circe is definitely an adult book, so I loved Circe even more than that book, but I really enjoyed that retelling as well. Alright, moving on. The Wayward Children series with Shannon McGuire. Now, I've heard about this series for years. It's not something that I have been like wanting to read, but I think it was late last year that people started to really talk about it, and it really caught my attention. And so I was like, those are very short books. I'm definitely gonna read those. They're all around 150, 200, maximum of 250 pages. I don't even think that they've reached 250 pages. Anyway, they are stories about children who get lost into these other dimensions or other worlds through different doors. That's why the first book is Every Heart a Doorway, I think. So I read those books, and I've read all of the books that are out in the series so far. I know there's one coming out this year, and I'm very excited about that. And I really enjoyed reading those books, and I definitely pursued them. They're short books, but even though they're very short books, they did not fail to make me feel for the characters and make me understand like where they are and how they are. And definitely I want to learn more about the worlds that they go into. And because it's a short book, we don't really see a lot of that. We focus more on the characters and their experiences, which I love. But, I wouldn't say it was lacking in that part. It's just that, I wanted more from their worlds because I'm a fantasy reader. I love fantasy, and a big part of why I love fantasy is because we get to experience these different worlds where there could be like different magic. That means that there's different rules, and aside from the different rules of magic, there's also like different laws and how things go, traditions and culture. And it's very interesting. That's why I really love fantasy books. And these short fantasy books, even though again they don't really focus much on the world building, I still really got to enjoy the book and understand how the world works through the experiences of the different characters. I really love this series. I definitely will continue to be reading this series throughout. Now, I didn't love all the books the same. Definitely, I think my favorite one is Down Among the Sticks and Bones. I think that's the fourth book. And then In an Absent Dream. And then I read Every Heart a Doorway. I think Every Heart a Doorway would be my third. And then Beneath the Sugar Sky is definitely my least favorite. I didn't really resonate with any of the characters there. I finished it, but even I already forgot how it sort of happened. But yeah. Next, another series, Book of Ancestor series by Mark Lawrence. This is a book series I've heard about, and mainly from Emily from Books with Emily Fox. She raves about this book, and she loves the whole series. And when I first heard her talking about this, I think the second book was just about to come out, so I was like, I'll wait until the third book is out, and or the last, I think there were 4 books, until all the books are out or almost out, then I'll read it, because I'm a binge reader. I prefer to read my series one after the other, my books in a series one after the other, and I really, really, really enjoyed this. Now, this tells, we follow the story of Nona, who grows up and gets recruited into this assassin school run by nuns. And, you know, of course, there are political intrigues. The world is slowly ending. Like, I think the sun's slowly getting blocked, and there's only a small part in the world where the sun is, and the rest of the world is, it's always like really cold and pretty dark. So we're following that in that setting, and her story and how she grows up. And what I really love about the book series is that it's very different. We're not just following Nona and a prophecy that she might be part of, and we're not just following that, and, you know, we're not just focused on a prophecy. We're also focused on the world that's ending, how the prophecy comes to be, and, you know, the different interpretations of prophecies. It's not a straightforward prophecy, and there's a lot of complications in terms of who is part of the prophecy or not, or what the prophecy really means. Is it related to how the world is going to end, or is it just a completely different thing, etc.? And so we follow them from when Nona was recruited to her training throughout the years, and she's just not training for like a year and a half, and then she's expected to save the world, and she doesn't really apply anything to the things that she learned from this assassin school, and she's just doing her own thing as she is, you know, what she already knows, and, you know, just from her wit and stuff. We really follow her as she struggles, her and her friends, as she struggles to go about school and learning all these things, and, you know, the political intrigues happening, and you would think it's a lot of things, and this the author isn't afraid of really making you think, and of like really killing people and hurting people, and the complications of the loyalties of people, and how that could change, and how, you know, how their brains kind of make reason with the things that they're offered, or, you know, entangled with. So it's really interesting. It's so complicated. It's such a different fantasy, assassin, prophecy, chosen one trope, because it's not just that. It's a lot more complicated. It's not just this person versus the world, kind of. So I really enjoyed that series. The next book is Confessions by Kanae Minato. Now, this one is very hard to rate. It's a very dark book. This is from a Japanese author. This is translated to English. It's quite short, but it's very intense. Here we're following the story of a teacher whose daughter dies, but the death of her daughter isn't just a straightforward accident. There might be like one of the kids involved, one of her students, or more of her students involved in the death of her daughter. And so we're following her story and their story and how it unfolds. It's very dark. I did not expect it to be so brutal in terms of how it affects your emotions, also what the you know, the people do here. And it's an interesting take on the things that motivate people and the things that might motivate someone to do something. And so it's such an interesting psychological, it makes you think a lot. So I really like. Next, The Power by Naomi Alderman. Now, I actually had a copy of this book, but my mom was looking for a book, like a feminist book, for their book exchange at her work. So she asked me if I had one. I was like, okay, yeah. So I give it to her. Now, this book, we're following the story of how women one day suddenly get powers, and, you know, how that changes the dynamic of the world, and how that changes the dynamic of relationship between men and women, and women in society. And so it's such an interesting take on that, where women like literally get powers, and so they get literally an upper hand to a lot of physical stuff, and in terms of not just literal powers, but also in terms of, you know, political power and societal standing and stuff. So it's really interesting. It's another book that's very hard to rate because it does it does raises a lot of questions and discussions. It's more of like a discussion ebook, just like Confessions, because there's not a straightforward good and bad person. We're just following the stories of these people, and then how they go through and how they think and how they rationalize, how they reason, and how they are motivated by these certain things and certain stuff that's happening. So I still really love that book. Highly recommend it. I mean, all these books are highly recommended, especially if it's something that sounds like it's gonna be right up your... Anyway, moving on. The Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin, another very much hyped book, very much a love book series. All the books in this series has won an award. I keep forgetting what the name of the award is, but all the books in this series, as they came out, they were given this award. And so it's very popular. It's an adult fantasy world where we're following different characters who live in this world where the earth is constantly changing. There's always like huge calamities happening. Like it's like on the verge of ending. Like how in different like end of the world movies, where if our earth were like it's at its last years, where all the natural disasters are very intense and very devastating. It's always like that. Like there's intense earthquakes, intense hurricanes, storms. It's very, very, very devastating. And there's always like a certain era where most of the population gets wiped out, and then they have to start a new civilization, and then a few more years, and then they get wiped out again from another devastating calamity. It's like that. It's always happening like that. But there are also people here in this world that can control the earth, and they're not really regarded very positively by the people. They're considered as dangerous people and are enemies, which is quite interesting, because you would think people who can control the earth and help these like calamities, help in lessening these calamities, would be regarded as people in power, because they're the ones who can help you control these calamities. Just saying. Anyway, that was very interesting to me. And so again, we are following different characters here. Some are just normal people, and some are people who are these origins. I think they're called origins. And we follow them in different points in their lives as well, and how they form these different relationships, and how they affect the world, and how they save the world and maybe devastate the world and stuff. And so again, it's very interesting. We're not just following one person or one plot point, one prophecy, one very big climactic point in this whole series. We're following them different points in their lives, and it's so interesting because it's not just the people that you're following too, although just the people alone, it would be really interesting, but you're also following how this world can be controlled and saved, and these people can be saved from these calamities by the other people, like the people that we're following, and how their interactions and how they're treated and stuff like that. And it's so interesting. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm sick. I've just been out of it. Anyway, Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin, highly recommend again. It's such a great fantasy series. Looking back actually on all these top books that I've read, I feel like I need to go back to my roots, which is reading fantasy series. I need to go back to that because those are my favorite genres, and I know that whenever I binge read series, I'm just like binge reading series one after the other. But I need to plan that out because borrowing from the library can be hit or miss. Sometimes a whole series can be available. Sometimes only the one book is completely available, and the rest you have to wait like weeks for it. Anyway, moving on. I'm already talking too much. Defy Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is the 5th book in the Shatter Me series. If you have followed me since last year, you would know that when she came out with her Restore Me, was that the 4th book? I didn't know that she was gonna come out with it. I thought the Shatter Me was only a trilogy, but I guess she decided to pick up the series from where it left off years ago. And so when I heard about it, I definitely borrowed that book, and then I waited for Defy Me, read it, loved it. Tahereh Mafi's writing is so beautiful. I have binge read her series Shatter Me years ago, and I remember poignantly, she is one of the best poetic writers I have ever read from. What's the word? I don't know. But she has this writing style where it makes you feel. And she doesn't need to use like big words or poignant sentences. It's just the way she writes them. And she doesn't write in the traditional manner of just straight up text and words and sentences and paragraphs like that. Sometimes she puts in like a whole paragraph where everything is like strike through, and it gives you a more visual representation of how a person thinks. So especially our main character Juliet. If you guys don't know what the Shatter Me series is about, we're following our main character Juliet, who has these electrifying power-ish. She can kill people with her touch, and she has been in asylum for years. And in the first book, we're following her as she meets this new roommate or like cellmate that she has, and we'll learn more about her, and then we'll learn more about the government and the regime and what's happening from outside and these people and stuff. And it gets really big and it gets really complicated, and I love the series. And so I've always wanted to read more from Tahereh Mafi, and then she comes out with the next 3 books. The third book in this second part of the whole series is coming out this year. I'm very excited. I'm already looking forward to it. I already have it on hold in library, and I know it's going to be epic because there's a lot of things that already happened in the past 2 books, and I'm excited to find out where it's gonna lead us. So next, Daisy Jones and the Six by Jenkins Reid. Let me just go get my book. Oh, there it is. Daisy Jones and the Six by Tahereh Jenkins Reid. I read her book, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo last year, and I really loved it. I loved her writing, and definitely from a lot of people, what a lot of people say, her characters feel real, like they actually happen, like they're actual celebrities, and I can say the same with this one. Now, Daisy Jones and the Six received a lot more mixed reviews than Evelyn Hugo, and I get why. It's a very different format, because here we're following the band Daisy Jones and the Six, and and we're following like them separately, like Daisy Jones and the Six band and the other people that are a huge part of this band. We're following them as they become Daisy Jones and the Six, because Daisy Jones used to be like a solo singer and the Six used to be like a band on its own, and you know the different dynamics between the characters. And here it's like an oral history. There is a writer who is interviewing these characters, and these are pretty much the transcript of this story. So as you can see, like there's names and you know their dialogues, and a lot of people have said that the audiobook is really good. I actually read this book twice this year, and I never do that. I never reread a book in the same year. Usually it takes me years to reread a book, because even though I love them, you know, I have other books to read about. But this is such a fast read, such an interesting read. I think this is 300 plus pages, and you just can't put it down. It's the kind of book where you're just so invested in it, in the characters and in the story, and so you cannot put it down. So Daisy Jones and the Six, Tahereh Jenkins Reid. I definitely am interested in reading more of Tahereh Jenkins Reid's previous books, but I know her previous books are not as good as Evelyn Hugo and Daisy Jones and the Six, but still, I want to read them. I think she has like 4 or 5 books. Next. The next one is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. Now this is from a genre of book that I never really read about. This is a contemporary fiction set, I think, in the 19 somethings. It's not in the 2000s, I think. But we're following here Mia Warren, who moves into this like elite community place where she is hired by, I think, Richardson's. And here in this community, the people are rich, and they are known to like really put a lot of pressure on their kids to be you know, in this really elite schools as well. And they're very exclusive, you know how it's like picket fence and, you know, perfect life, but there's a lot of like secrets and intrigues between the family and among the different families here. And so when Mia Warren, a single mother, and her daughter moves into this, they kind of shake up the whole community, and you know they influence a lot of the things that start escalating from here. Like already there are like dramas between the families, but when Mia Warren and her daughter moves into this community, kind of just escalates. And I really enjoyed this book because again, it's a take on these different characters and their stories and their reasonings and their motivations. And it's very interesting because here, even though Mia is seen as different, and the people are seen as trying to make their lives seem perfect, none of them are perfect. They have their own struggles, they have their own reasonings. And again, it's just such a very interesting take on these people and, you know, their motivations and why they do what they do and say what they do. So again, very interesting. It's not my usual genre. I find a lot of these books very uninteresting and very, I don't know, they're just not as riveting as fantasy for me. But this one I really enjoyed, and this is a really fast read too. This is 300 less than 250 pages, I think. So yeah, Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste. The next one is another genre that I don't really read a lot about. I love like romance books, but a lot of romance books feel very forced. And so when I read Helen Hoang's The Kiss Quotient, I was like, oh, shook by that, because I didn't expect it to be very steamy. I thought, you know, I expect it to be cute and romantic and, you know, maybe a little bit emotional, but I didn't expect it to be steamy. And so I was very excited when she announced, or when I found out she has another book coming out in that same kind of world series. We're following a cousin of the main character from The Kiss Quotient, Kai. This is The Brightest by Helen Hoang. Here we're following Kai. He is on the spectrum as well, on the autism spectrum. We're on The Kiss Quotient. We're following Sally, and I forgot the name of the guy, Kai's cousin. Sally, I think that's her name. Sally? Sandy. I already forgot, but I know her name starts with an S. It's also an autism spectrum, which I think was very interesting, and it is very interesting because the author is also on the spectrum. And I've always been, that was so interesting to me because I wanted to read more books written by these characters. I've written by authors in the spectrum because they experience the world in a different way. I mean, obviously people experience it in a different way, but theirs are a little bit more different in terms of, you know, how they make sense and feel certain things, like their sensations. Biologically, it really is different. So outside of that, I really loved this book as well. Characters are so interesting. They're not perfect. They have, you know, their flaws, their imperfect, like just them having these, you know, struggles within themselves and within their families. And it's so interesting to see how they form relationships and how sometimes they butcher these relationships from, you know, their experiences and from just how they interpret certain things. Again, it's a book about people and their motivations and how they think and how they reason out. And so it's very interesting to me, and I really love the dynamic between the two characters that we're following. I love them, and I definitely want to read more from Helen Hoang, because I feel like she definitely has like characters that are very complex and sometimes can be quite contrasting. Is that the right word? I forget the term, to what people would initially think of them, or what people would initially think. So I've already been talking for 35 minutes. We're almost there.